1. Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable. Wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to residents against wood smoke emission particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, or RAWSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHXXY October 2nd, 2025. What is the most shocking consequence of COVID-19 in your field? In Webisode 57DHXXY 1 Poland 2023 election North Carolina 1890s elections Chile 1988 election Serbia 2000 election Ukraine 2004 election Brazil 2022 election. This is how you defeat an autocrat. 2 RFK Junior decisions imposed on the American people based on no medical or scientific facts. Kennedy Crusade on linking vaccines and autism. What happened? RAWSEP View It is not benign that RFK Jr. delayed COVID-19 vaccine rollout in fall 2025 for no scientific or medical reason. 3. The United Kingdom 5 years on from the pandemic. How has COVID changed our world? This article is from March 19, 2025. A group of experts on politics, trade, literature, psychology, and work were asked what has been the most surprising or shocking consequence of COVID-19 in your field. 4. Free Speech Jane Fonda relaunches free speech group, started by her father during the McCarthy era in wake of the Trump censorship, threats. The actor established again the Committee for the First Amendment with a list support main content. 1 Poland 2023 election North Carolina 1890s elections Chile 1988 election Serbia 2000 election Ukraine 2004 election Brazil 2022 election. This is how you defeat an autocrat. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times October 2nd, 2025. People celebrating election results in Poland in 2023. Those results led to the end of the rule of the Law and Justice Party. The writer served on the National Security Council in the Biden administration and is an expert on electoral interference ahead of the Poland 2023 parliamentary election. The future of American democracy was in doubt well before the contest. The governing party Law and Justice had launched a sweeping campaign to put the opposition at a disadvantage. The party had stacked the judiciary with ally state media outlets, cast the opposition leader Donald Tusk as a foreign agent. Security services investigated domestic critics, fearing state retaliation. Business executives grew reluctant to donate to the opposition. Many opted instead to support Law and Justice. Tusk and his broad coalition fought back undeterred. They highlighted the corruption, high inflation, and strict against abortion policies that many voters associated with Law and Justice. At rallies, Tusk championed a view of Polish patriotism grounded in democracy and European integration, which contrasted sharply with the Law and Justice against immigrant against European message of a Poland under siege. When the election came, a remarkable 74% of the electorate turned out, and the Tusk coalition won. Polish democracy, which had appeared on the brink of collapse, had survived the defeat of Law and Justice in 2023, was an example of an overlooked phenomenon. Autocrats, whether aspiring or entrenched, can lose elections. Defeating them can be an uphill battle. In extreme cases, they declare states of emergency, deploy the military, and even fabricate vote counts. This playbook has worked in places like the Russia of Putin, the Hungary of Viktor Orban, and the Venezuela of Nicolas Maduro, but in other countries the democratic opposition has overcome authoritarian rule and prevailed at the ballot box. These cases, while they have distinct national contexts, can also help provide a roadmap for democratic movements today. As a baseline, the opposition must unify. American history offers an example. In the Jim Crow South, the conservative Democratic Party engaged in rampant voter intimidation, ballot stuffing, and other authoritarian tactics to manipulate elections. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Republicans and populists in North Carolina formed fusion coalitions to increase their chances of victory in the North Carolina 1894 and 1896 elections. When campaigning in unfair conditions, opposition leaders must inspire voters to remain hopeful and to participate in elections. Just before the 1988 plebiscite in Chile on whether to extend the Augusto Pinochet 15-year dictatorship, the opposition was allowed to advertise on television for 15 minutes a night, whereas the Pinochet campaign warned of chaos and instability if he lost. The opposition offered viewers a positive economic agenda alongside uplifting campaign slogans such as Chile Joy is coming. This optimistic vision, combined with youth mobilization, opposition unity, and rigorous voter registration and poll watching, contributed to the Pinochet defeat and paved the way for the Chile democratic transition. Young voters are often at the heart of successful opposition movements. In the Serbia 2000 election, President Slobodan Milosevic faced steep resistance from Otpor, a vibrant student-led movement. Otpor members rallied voters, scrawled against Milosevic graffiti across the country, and distributed campaign materials with the simple slogan, "He has finished." The Milosevic regime arrested hundreds of Otpor members, which only further motivated citizens to vote him out of office. In the Ukraine 2004 election, Viktor Yushchenko, the charismatic opposition leader, appeared to anticipate that the ruling regime would doctor the results. Indeed, as voting unfolded, election monitors and the independent press reported widespread irregularities. Yushchenko filed an appeal with the Supreme Court and rallied his supporters. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians protested peacefully in Kyiv, citing fraud. The Supreme Court invalidated the runoff and ordered a second vote, in which the opposition triumphed. But judges can help protect elections only if they are willing to uphold the law. After the Brazil 2022 election, when it was announced that Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who was the rival of Jair Bolsonaro, had won, supporters of Bolsonaro set up roadblocks across the country in protest. The Supreme Court of Brazil swiftly ordered these roadblocks dismantled, and the Electoral Court of Brazil certified the result. Even as Bolsonaro refused to concede, opposition figures need courage to unify and lead. Judges, business executives, lawyers, and journalists need courage to withstand intimidation. Voters need courage to participate in elections, protest peacefully, and act with agency rather than adapt to authoritarian rule. Authoritarians have lost elections before, and they will again. 2 RFK Junior decisions imposed on the American people based on no medical or scientific facts. Kennedy Crusade on linking vaccines and autism. What happened? RAWSEP View It is not benign that RFK Jr. delayed COVID-19 vaccine rollout in fall 2025 for no scientific or medical reason. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization, The New York Times, October 1st, 2025. The ACIP session on September 18th and 19th, 2025 had loomed for months as an enormously consequential event, with the panel considering changes to the conventional immunization schedule, opening up the possibility that the basic familiar vaccine protocol of America would be taken apart or sabotaged. The meeting is now behind us, an absolute embarrassment of bad science, disingenuous argumentation, and basic bureaucratic dysfunction, but the meeting also produced some concrete outcomes in the form of votes on 2 sets of recommendations. Kennedy has been crusading against vaccines for decades, and his elevation to Health and Human Services Secretary brought forward the possibility of drastic change. So where is it? To many watching closely, the meetings were a disaster. To those paying a little less attention or just skimming the headlines, it looked a little different. The panel voted to separate into 2 shots what had been available as a single shot for measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella, better known as chickenpox, for children under the age of 4, and voted to change the recommendation for COVID shots, which few Americans plan to get anyway, so that only people age 65 or older and those with certain medical conditions would be officially encouraged to be vaccinated, and all others just prompted to discuss the matter with their doctors. This meant that aside from the chickenpox vaccine changes, but the routine immunization schedule is left for now unchanged. During the news conference introducing the much-hyped Autism report on September 22, 2025, President Trump wove from subject to subject and ranted ignorantly and irresponsibly about vaccines, but warned only about possible consequences of Tylenol use in pregnancy. It resembled the chaotic Trump 2020 COVID news conferences, which highlighted the debunked COVID-19 usages of hydroxychloroquine and disinfectants, and seems to illustrate the Steve Bannon battle plan for the information war now applied to science and public health. That plan is to flood the zone with nonsense. The muddled messaging will have consequences for public health. Fewer pregnant women will now feel comfortable taking Tylenol. The pattern also raises 2 questions about public health under RFK Jr. First, how much comfort should American liberals take in the bumbling incompetence and incoherence of MAGA and MAHA when it comes to science? How much should we fear incompetence that stymies medical innovation? And second, what is the true MAHA agenda? Is Kennedy serious about the supposed vaccine threats to public health? Are small shifts in policy only the first steps in a strategic longer-term plan? A very clear majority of Americans support routine vaccinations. The Food and Drug Administration Chief Marty McCarthy and the National Institutes of Health boss Jay Bhattacharya have publicly said that they do not believe there is any link between vaccines and autism. But since the Tylenol autism speech, Trump has posted on social media in support of delaying the hepatitis B vaccine until at least 12 years old, rather than 1 month as ACIP seemed to be considering, and in support of spacing out the other vaccines much further than the advisory panel was recommending. On Thursday, the president suddenly announced the imposition of 100% tariffs on some pharmaceutical imports, and the country is bracing for a spike in health insurance premiums. Over the weekend, he shared on Truth Social an AI-generated video purporting to show Fox News cutting to him announcing an all-fantastical breakthrough medical technology called a med bed, a futuristic cure. All that conspiracy theorists have long accused the federal government of hoarding rather than distributing to the public. Trump later deleted the post. This looks like rallying a posse on vaccines. The trust of Republicans in federal institutions of public health has increased in 2025, but a decline in trust in federal institutions of public health among Democrats is much larger, and overall only 37% of Americans trust RFK Jr. 3. The United Kingdom 5 years on from the pandemic. How has COVID changed our world? This article is from March 19, 2025. A group of experts on politics, trade, literature, psychology, and work were asked what has been the most surprising or shocking consequence of COVID-19 in your field. RAWSEP View as RFK Jr. threatens United States citizens with another COVID pandemic by denying access to COVID vaccines. Can we look back to the height of the COVID-19 pandemic before vaccines were available and find that any lessons have been learned about the response of the public? Was the response to COVID-19 adequate or the best we could have done or could do? Did the public step up and self-isolate, or even understand the need to self-isolate or make other concessions in order to protect themselves and, most importantly, protect others from the disease? Did the public later wear masks or even understand the need to wear masks or make other concessions in order to protect themselves and, most importantly, protect others from the disease? Is there a divide politically in the United States between Republicans and Democrats when it comes to self-isolating, wearing masks, or even getting the miraculous vaccine against COVID in the present day? The motivation to self-isolate and wear masks before there was a vaccine and the motivation to get the vaccine when the vaccine was available is understandable to the editor of RAWSEP. It is really beyond the comprehension of the editor of RAWSEP that an individual would choose not to get a vaccine against a deadly disease. It is really beyond the comprehension of the editor of RAWSEP that an individual would choose to spread misinformation and disinformation about a vaccine which lessens the effects of a deadly disease and has saved millions of lives in order to convince other people not to get the available vaccine. It is really beyond the comprehension of the editor of RAWSEP that an individual would want a deadly disease to spread in order to assert some sort of power over other people. The motivation to spread a deadly disease is one thing. In actuality, deliberately spreading a deadly disease whose deadliness can easily be prevented by a vaccine should be an action that is labeled a crime. This is the lesson that the editor of RAWSEP learned during the COVID-19 pandemic that has died down because people began to get vaccinated during the pandemic. The individuals who were given the opportunity to self-isolate, and because they were lucky enough not to be frontline workers and did not self-isolate, showed their true colors of evil intent toward other people they came in contact with, and even their own families. Those who were lucky enough to be issued masks and did not use them showed their evil intent toward other people who they came in contact with, and even their own families. Those who were lucky enough, most of the population of the United States who were able to get free COVID-19 vaccines and did not take the vaccines showed their evil intent toward other people who they came in contact with, and even their own families. The word evil was rarely thought of or uttered by the editor of RAWSEP until the COVID-19 Pandemic because as time went on, surely the number of lives lost sobered up and educated any people who did not know any better and who were not evil at the onset of the pandemic. Did the pandemic make people evil because they felt unheard? That is trivial politicizing of a medical emergency. Was the pandemic used by those few people of evil intent to bully their neighbors with the threat of spreading the disease to them? Was the pandemic used by those few people of evil intent to bully their neighbors with the threat of spreading the disease to them? Was the pandemic used by those few people of evil intent to bully people on public transport with the threat of spreading the disease to them? Was the pandemic used by those few people of evil intent to bully their co-religionists with the threat of spreading the disease to them? If a survey was taken of the few people of evil intent who used the pandemic to bully those around them, it would uncover different motivations, but those motivations would be excuses for not taking simple steps to protect those around them. The parallels with indoor residential wood burning were brought home to the editor of RAWSEP during the pandemic. There is no economic reason to burn wood for home heating. There is no side effect of addiction withdrawal symptoms from indoor residential wood burning, as there are addiction to nicotine withdrawal symptoms from quitting cigarette or other tobacco smoking. The air pollution from indoor residential wood burning extends farther than the confines of a workplace to the yards and infiltrates the homes of near neighbors. Of an indoor residential wood burner, cigarette and other tobacco smoking is banned from many workplaces and even from public restaurants and other public venues because proximity to cigarette and other tobacco smoke can adversely affect the health of colleagues and other people in a public space. But even though indoor residential wood burning affects people much farther away and with more pollution, indoor residential wood burning is not routinely banned, as it should be, since there are decades of research on the adverse health effects of wood smoke. Working from home during a pandemic is doubly concerning, although working from home is a godsend now and was a godsend at the height of the pandemic. If you were not a frontline worker, if you work at home during a pandemic, you are exposed to wood smoke pollution more hours of the day. If your near neighbor is an indoor residential wood burner at home, you are without the protection of a cigarette smoking ban at the workplace, not to mention you are not protected by an indoor residential wood burning ban at your work from home workplace. A combination of COVID along with unnecessary and preventable air pollution can happen, and it is all the result of bullying. No matter what the motivation, the bright light of hope came during the Biden administration. As any truthful person will attest, the vaccine became widely available, and because enough people took it and continue to take the vaccine, we can return to somewhat normal lives we led before the pandemic. But people who use a pandemic to bully other people will probably return to their old ways, their old traditions of evil. If they have the weapons these days, the weapons are denying vaccines to those who had access to them before, not based on any medical or scientific evidence, but based on some sort of need to bully others. Money may be involved, it is hard to tell, but there is money to be made, and even frivolous lawsuits unmoored to scientific facts brought to bully people. In the case of indoor residential wood burning, there is money to be made by the indoor residential wood burning industry as well as the industrial wood burning industry against all scientific evidence. Some people have not become educated on the facts that wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 and CO2 as the fossil fuel burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. New ways of burning would pop up and new reasons for burning would pop up, but they are all unnecessary, and it is easy to prevent wood burning for any reason. For home heating, heat pump rebates of up to $8,000 based on a sliding income scale are available until the end of 2025 for heat pumps that work down to 40 degrees below zero, also function as air conditioners and lower electricity bills immediately. Solar power, wind power, and geothermal power to charge an electric grid are low priced and getting lower priced. In 2025, there is no reason to choose air polluting home heating using wood or industrial burning using wood. There is a commercial for a chocolate bar I just saw that demonstrates how to make marshmallow so morays in an oven. If people have not thought of that themselves before, no excuses, folks. No more COVID-19, no more air polluting wood burning. Do not you think we get enough air polluting wood burning from wildfires? The wood burning air pollution feeds climate change, that feeds wildfires, that feeds global warming and cycles. We can break the cycle, and it starts with individuals with good intentions, not evil intentions. Knowing how to recognize evil is another lesson from the pandemic. Give evil a wide berth, and you may survive COVID. Get evil pollution out of your neighborhood by banning air polluting wood burning done for no apparent reason except evil intent or massive ignorance. RAWSEP exists to burst through the bubble of ignorance. You have been schooled here. The influenza epidemic of over 100 years ago yielded at least one good book called Pale Horse Pale Rider. It made the epidemic almost mythical and so easy to brush aside as almost a dream that all could forget. That is a natural human response. I hope you all are living happy lives now, free of care. I hope we can all stay that way. We all have to act as if we care about our fellow human beings and go out of our way to avoid those who would do us harm or those who would pollute our air that we need to breathe. With regard to teaching and learning during the pandemic, for the editor of RAWSEP, distance learning became so accessible that she learned some Spanish and German for the first time. The teaching and learning and group chats were neither atomized nor mechanical at all. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The Guardian. March 1st, 2025. The cost of pessimistic individualism was measured in tens of thousands of lives. Is it time for the big COVID novel? Partygate was the perfect scandal to mobilize resentment of a remote and arrogant political class. As Chinese factories closed, the fragility of global trade was revealed. Online teaching has made education more atomized and mechanical. We want to forget it ever happened. Instead, we should be preparing for the next one. Mutual aid groups thrived in the face of state indifference, and many still do. Working from home was supposed to be a revolution, but it mostly benefited men. Conspiracy theories have moved from the fringes of society to the centers of power. The National Health Service (NHS) transformed for the better. It has since regressed. The cost of pessimistic individualism was measured in tens of thousands of lives. Great calamities often provoke reflections about the human condition. The 1918-19 influenza pandemic forced people to rethink how they relate to the natural world, inspiring a new style of architecture, a new appreciation of the Outdoors and a range of back-to-nature movements, COVID did have something profound to teach us about the relationship of individuals to society, the notion that people would lack the psychological resilience to cope with stringent measures. This contributed to the delay of the first lockdown, yet concerns that the masses would not measure up were ill-founded. The common thread of COVID led people to develop a shared identity based around community. People became more concerned about the fate of others, which was reflected in enduring levels of adherence to stringent restrictions. Resilience, it turned out, was not something people lacked, but something that arises when people think and act as a group. For many, though, that realization came too late. It has been estimated that had Britain locked down a week earlier, it could have saved more than 30,000 people 2 weeks, and up to 40,000 more people would have survived. The cost of pessimistic individualism was ultimately measured in tens of thousands of lives. One UK government official explanation for why the government repeatedly refused calls to increase support for self-isolation: because people would game the system. Far from being a problem, the public were the best asset. The government had the big issue to come out of COVID is the need to rethink the relationship between the individual and the collective. Far from eroding our rationality, the group empowers us, makes us agents of our own fate, and provides resilience in hard times. If we do not understand that, we will have learned nothing from COVID, and the next pandemic response will be as much of a shambles as the last. Is it time for the big COVID novel? It has been 5 years since the start of the COVID pandemic, and yet there have been few novels grappling explicitly with its impact. Talking about pandemic literature as a concept also makes it seem as if it is over when the lives of many people continue to be irrevocably altered by COVID. There is a clear beginning, but no definitive ending. 5 years in this context seems like no time at all. The submission pile of an editor is full of escapist stories. Readers, she told me, perhaps want to be taken as far away as possible from the frightening prospect of reality. But my favorite COVID novel is Burnt Coat by Sarah Hall, released in October 2021, a mere 18 months after that first lockdown. Eerily prescient in its portrayal of a virus that lingers in the body, it is also expansive, asking questions about art, love, and creation in the face of disaster. Written in that aforementioned white heat, it did not wait for the event to feel distant, but captured that strange time as it happened, and perhaps in that state of rawness yielded something that felt more true and significant. UK Partygate. The popularity of Prime Minister peaked around the time that he was personally incapacitated by COVID. The Boris Johnson landslide victory in the 2019 general election on a pledge to get Brexit done conveyed a strong public appetite for calmer politics. The first lockdown effectively delivered just that. The enabling law, monumentally draconian for a democracy, was bundled through Parliament in 4 days. The famously raucous Commons chamber was muted by social distancing strictures, chronic dysfunction at the center, wasteful misallocation of resources, lethal hesitation, and divisions over strategy. These did not go unreported with Partygate. The staggering degeneracy of the Johnson regime was exposed before the public gaze, resisting modernization, venerating dilettantism, and conflating rhetorical dexterity with judgment when Britain needed serious, sober leadership. It found itself at the mercy of inadequate, clownish whimsy that was a tragedy, but not an accident. The debauching of Downing Street during lockdown was unlawful, and the dishonest denials of the Prime Minister put him in contempt of Parliament. Those were the technical offenses that finished his career, but the true penalty is still being paid by everyone else. It is measured in heightened cynicism and depleted trust in governing institutions that need to command public confidence for democracy to function. As Chinese factories closed, the fragility of global trade was revealed. Transport in and out of China slowed to a crawl. Factory towns, including Suzhou, closed while media coverage of lockdowns focused on their human impact. The pandemic transformed supply chains and had a huge impact on global trade. At sea, ships were in effect stranded with ports closed. There was nowhere to dock their cargo. International maritime treaties dictate that seafarers should not spend more than 11 continuous months at sea. According to the International Maritime Organization, the number of sailors working long after the end of their contracts rose to 400,000. Some remained on their ships for more than 22 months, wandering the seas of the world with no end in sight. On land, last-mile logistics drivers delivering food and groceries were designated as frontline workers in Britain, along with nurses and bus drivers. They were among the largest group of workers who became ill with COVID. Not everyone suffered from the effects of the virus. Shipping companies sought subsidies from governments, even as increased demand for goods meant their rates rose to their highest in history, netting them eye-watering profits. Because Chinese trade slowed, so too did the production, sale, and export of personal protective equipment (PPE) beyond the Chinese border. Spying and opportunity charlatans with excellent connections to the British government set up companies to provide PPE and cleaned up on lucrative contracts for often defective or even non-existent products. Some European and U.S. corporations to shifted their factories nearer to home. The U.S. had already been threatening a trade war with China long before the slowdown, and nearshoring neatly fitted with this new strategic posture. As Trump 2.0 affects a flurry of executive orders implementing tariffs against China and many other trading partners, we are seeing the new era of trade that COVID helped to accelerate. For free speech, Jane Fonda relaunches Free Speech Group. Started by her father during the McCarthy era in wake of the Trump censorship threats, the actor re-established the Committee for the First Amendment with a list support excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, October 1st, 2025. Jane Fonda has relaunched the Committee for the First Amendment, the McCarthy era initiative started by her father Henry Fonda. With a groundswell of celebrity support, the new committee established to protect free speech from government censorship has the support of over 550 entertainment figures, including Quinta Brunson, Viola Davis, Kerry Washington, Natalie Portman, Aaron Sorkin, Spike Lee, Pedro Pascal, Ben Stiller, Whoopi Goldberg, Sean Penn, John Legend, Damon Lindelof, Julianne Moore, Janelle Monáe, Barbara Streisand, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Ethan Hawke, Billie Eilish, Angelica Houston, and Judd Apatow. The McCarthy era ended when Americans from across the political spectrum finally came together and stood up for the principles in the Constitution against the forces of repression. Fonda said in a statement, "Those forces have returned, and it is our turn to stand together in defense of our constitutional rights." In a letter encouraging her peers to join the initiative, Fonda pointed to her long history as a civil rights activist. "I am 87 years old," she wrote. "I have seen war, repression, protest, and backlash have been celebrated, and I have been branded an enemy of the state, but I can tell you this is the most frightening moment of my life. She added, when I feel scared, I look to history. I wish there were a secret playbook with all the answers, but there never has been. The only thing that has ever worked time and time again is solidarity, binding together, finding bravery in numbers too big to ignore, and standing up for one another. Headlines: The New York Times, October 1st, 2025. Consumers reading opinion: why getting older might be the biggest plot twist of life. The New York Times. Electric cars, clean energy, self-driving cars. When a driverless car makes an illegal U-turn, who gets the ticket? The New York Times. Government shutdown opinion: the looming shutdown is about Obamacare. The New York Times. Government shutdown opinion: the real stakes of the shutdown. The New York Times. Government shutdown opinion: Trump has no mandate to destroy America. The New York Times. Government shutdown: the shutdown funding lapse ripples across agencies as Senate rejects plans to reopen. The New York Times. Government shutdown: the shutdown puts a divided Fed in a perilous position. The New York Times. Government shutdown: Trump uses shutdown to maximize pain for Democrats and move forward with layoffs. The New York Times. Government shutdown: Vance laughs off fake video of Hakeem Jeffries. I think it is funny. The New York Times. Medicine and science: tell us about your experience with early onset cancer. The New York Times. Music opinion: Taylor Swift is no showgirl. The New York Times. Music: when Taylor Swift met her life of a showgirl partner Max Martin. The New York Times. Nevada: why is Las Vegas tourism declining? It is a perfect storm. The New York Times. New York Trump actions: RAWSEP View trains can be clean energy transport if correctly regulated. From the article headline: Trump to withhold $18 billion for New York area transit projects. The New York Times. Ohio opinion: why cannot another working class kid make their way out of Ohio? The New York Times. RFK Junior Decisions imposed on the American people based on no medical or scientific facts. Opinion: Kennedy Crusade on linking vaccines and autism. What happened? The New York Times. Transportation: Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. RAWSEP View trains can be clean energy transport if correctly regulated. From the article headline: National Transport Safety Board NTSB faults Philadelphia Transit Agency over train fires. The New York Times. Trump actions: Trump fires members of Humanities Council. The New York Times. Trump aviation: two planes collide on LaGuardia Airport taxiway. The New York Times. Trump military: dangerous cities. The military: Trump and the founding fathers. The New York Times. Trump military: Trump gave the military brass a rehashed speech until minute 44. The New York Times. Trump and universities: Trump administration asks colleges to sign compact to get funding preference. The New York Times. Women working opinion: American women are leaving the workforce. Why? The New York Times. Venezuela opinion: the Trump Venezuela policy is pure revenge fantasy. The New York Times. Belgium opinion: Brussels is the heart of Europe and it is not going well. The New York Times. Germany: in Germany, a watch design inspired by a dragonfly. The New York Times. Ukraine: Moscow indicates retaliation if Europe uses Russian assets for Ukraine. The New York Times. Poland opinion: how to beat an autocrat at the ballot box. The New York Times. Italy: Pope Leo calls for unity on climate at a divided moment. The New York Times. The Guardian, October 2nd, 2025. Artificial intelligence historian uses AI to help identify Nazi in notorious Holocaust murder image. Second World War. The Guardian. Government shutdown leaves federal workers on edge as Trump eyes more job cuts. U.S. federal government shutdown 2025. The Guardian. Medicine and health: the Trump H-1B visa fee is a death sentence for U.S. healthcare. Ira Malam. The Guardian. Movie star Democrat Jane Fonda relaunches free speech group started by her father during the McCarthy era. Jane Fonda. The Guardian. Argentina: Farage Trump must your boy Javier Milei just took one hell of a beating. Why so quiet? A diffier chakraborty. The Guardian. Argentina. The Guardian. View on the Trump Argentina bailout: it is a political play, not an economic plan. Editorial: The Guardian. Europe: American democracy might not survive another year. Is Europe ready for that? Alexander Hurst. The Guardian. Denmark: Russia will not stop until they are forced to do so. Danish PM warns as she opens European Leaders Summit. Europe Live: France: French military detained too after boarding Russia linked oil tanker suspected of launching drones. France. The Guardian. Ukraine: RAWSEP View. This points out the danger of nuclear power accidents caused by human error are predictable. Nuclear power plants can also be held hostage in wartime. This increases the odds of a nuclear accident. From the article headline: Russia accused of sabotaging last power line into Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Ukraine. The Guardian headlines: The Guardian, October 1st, 2025. Democrats: Vance uses false claims to pin shutdown blame on Democrats as White House warns of layoffs. U.S. politics: The Guardian. Democrats: White House plays racist deepfake videos of Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries on loop. As it happened. U.S. federal government shutdown 2025. The Guardian. Medicine and science: colon cancer is on the rise among young people, and research points to one major culprit, Devi Sridhar. The Guardian. Medicine and science: 5 years on from the pandemic, how has COVID changed our world? Stephen Riker, Rachel Clark, Raphael Bear, Francis Ryan, and others. The Guardian. Oregon: Portland: Trump falsely claims that National Guard troops are in place in Portland. The Guardian. Trump actions: a critique of pure stupidity. Understanding Trump 2.0. Donald Trump. The Guardian. Trump military veterans react to the Hegseth insulting address to generals and admirals. Pete Hegseth. The Guardian. Europe: aviation air safety in Europe is at risk amid cost cutting and staff pressures. Study warns airline industry. The Guardian. Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack: letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack: your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
1. Introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.